I've been grading this morning for a couple hours, and it's been really wonderful to see all the work that you're doing. And I really feel like a lot of you, I get have been going through about 20 each, coloring and labeling, and a lot of you do really great work and take the time to do the coloring, which I really appreciate, and I think your brain appreciates too, getting that into the cells in there. I started doing the labeling, the coloring part of the exercises when I was following a Berkeley professor who is a real heavy duty brain anatomist, or was. She passed away. She was very old, and she wrote a brain coloring book as one of her books, and she was very very sophisticated. She had Einstein's brain at some point, and so that made me feel like, okay, we can do coloring, even though it seems like it's coloring. It's like we do that in kindergarten or so, but it has a very good use to it for the brain to process the material. And so there is a lot of terms on the term list that you've gone through, and I want to reiterate and make sure everyone knows that the terms that I need you to label are the terms that are, look at that, we're getting to the muscles, are the terms that are in the exercises, like in here, these terms, and not other terms. So when it now comes to muscles, these are the muscles I need you to label. I don't need you to go deeper than that. There's a couple of reasons to all of that, because for once, it's just so many things that we could term and label. In the muscle, it just goes into the hand muscles and foot muscles more detailed, and maybe a few structures lower and deeper in the forearm muscles. But for the most part, we're covering a lot of them by what we're doing here. As it comes to the bones, that's more where we have so many different landmarks on a skull, for example, and I only want you to do and focus on the ones that I have on the list. Those are most in the skeletal, appendicular skeleton, and also in the axial skeleton. A lot of them are joints, things that make joints, and then muscle attachments, the ones that I want you to focus on. So then they tie in with the muscles as we get through the muscular system. So make sure of that, because sometimes I have some students, they either don't label, they only label the bones, for example, or they label so many things, which is great. But as it comes then to the test, you mess your brain up a little bit, because it can be overwhelming. And so make sure as you go through the material, you go through the test review, and for sure, minimally, print out this list. If you don't have it already in any other format, including the material, it's in there as well. But this is the list of all the terms that we are using for the material, for the exam, and for the integration, and I base basically everything on those in our class. So make sure you reference back to that and don't go overboard when you don't have to. Please. Of course, the ones that are in the class, they usually do it not the wrong way, or the excessively extra work way. Okay, so that's for that part. Is that pretty clear, you guys? Sensible? Somebody give me feedback.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Good. All right, then this week what we're doing is we're moving from the bones to the muscles, and we're gonna do bone integration tonight in the lab. And if you can, come in, because it's a bunch of bones. So we're having also a fairly busy couple hours to go through them and talk about them and lament about them and integrate the information. And it really helps for a lot of us to settle the information down. It's kind of another version of the coloring and labeling. It's going to class and touching the bones and talking about it, and you can ask me questions and clarify and so forth. So it's usually a lot of fun if you can make it. But then this week, in terms of the lecture, and then in lab next week, we start going into the muscles, which is another one of my things that I love the most. And so we have a session on muscle function, and that's the physiology of muscle, because muscle what muscle does, it contracts. That's really all it does. It doesn't do more than that. So it really just shortens actively. It does other things passively, like it lengthens passively. You can pull it apart, for example. It stretches, but it does that passively. So we don't need to work, and the physiology is a little bit different. When we look at our main discussion on physiology, in here we're going to go into how does the muscle contract, and this is where we get into a interesting thing where the nerve talks to the muscle, releases a chemical in a part of the muscle, and then calcium has a role to make sure two long-stranded proteins that go the whole length of the muscle can attach to one another, and one of them can pull on the other strand, and we do that a gazillion times next to one another along the whole muscle, and all of that together will contract an entire muscle. And so that's what you're going to learn in here with these sort of like little graphic type of things. And then next week we can actually go into the classroom too, and we have models that show that visually a little bit more in 3 dimensions, and we can talk more about it. So that's sort of the crux. If you actually just understood what I told you here, which is the big picture of how it works in a video, go back a couple times, because that's really everything else. How it works in more detail is feeding back to that, how it works. So the other thing is we talk about how the different parts that take place in that process, how the muscle fibers, those little proteins, the strand that pull on each other, attach to one another, and so forth. And then we also talk in there, of course, about how the nerve comes in and fires onto the muscle, because the nerve has to tell the muscle to contract and irritate it, and how that works. And then we go a little bit more into energy. Muscle is actually, if you think about it, muscle is the biggest consumer of energy in the body. So keeping us upright is actually the biggest consumer of energy. That is why I'm going through the evaluations in the HealthKit. Last week we did the sitting type, the ergonomic workstation evaluation. This week we're going to do the posture evaluation. And if you come to class, if you have enough time, I'm thinking we're going to do a little bit of that too with each other. So but if not, we'll see how far we go, and how long we have brain space and energy. We don't want to overdo it, but that's why I'm bringing in the posture, because it's not just that if we have a long-term poor posture when we're old, we're just looking completely crooked and gravity overtakes us and pulls us down. It is also a factor of when we sit crooked or when we stand crooked all day and slouching, we get much more tired, because the muscle needs to work so much harder to push us up against gravity. And so that's where muscle and energy has a big interplay with each other, and actually be amazed how much tired people have, how much tiredness people get from poor posture. That would actually be interesting to study that. I think I should do a search on that, or somebody maybe Google it if you have a moment. Then we also differentiate here between muscles, and these are really actually the muscles that move an object, and muscle that just hold an object. And so some muscles are movers and some muscles are holders. And obviously every muscle can do both. But when we look at muscles that hold, we call them isometric. The word iso means the same. The metric refers to meter, and meter is a distance measurement. So this means the meter stays the same, isometric. See, that's my brain works weird with words. So I'm just, blabbing these things out, how my brain puts them together. So we have these muscles that don't do movement, and those are usually postural muscles. They hold us up against gravity, that we stand up straight. And the better our posture is, the more our head sits over the shoulders and not forward, the less these muscles have to work and hold us up against gravity. And then that's, again, where we use all the energy, or lots of the energy, during a day. And then the other muscles that move when we walk, when we lift, and when we write, and all those motions that we do in the world, And actually, it's also muscle tissue that's not the motion on the inside of the body. That's just not the skeletal muscles, the ones we mainly talk about. But those we call isotonic, and the word tonic means to the tone, refers to the tone of the muscle, how strong the muscle contracts and pulls. That's the tone of a muscle. That continual contraction is the same strength, and tone and strength you can sort of interchange. That will create the movement. And so a movement muscle is not considered an isotonic muscle or an isotonic muscle contraction, because every muscle can really do both at the end of the day. Then another thing that is important is the terminology of the attachments of the muscle to the bone. And we use the term origin and insertion for the muscle attachments. So we can call them just muscle attachments because every muscle attaches to two bones, or more than two bones, but at least generally speaking, two bones, because we need one, and we usually don't attach to the same bone. We attach to a different bone. So we attach from one bone to another bone, and then when the muscle shortens, and that's its active movement, then those two bones move. And in an isometric contraction, those joints, those connections, two bones will just stay in the same position. And so we're going to have two places minimally where muscles attach. We have one attachment that's close. No, we have one attachment where the muscle sort of starts from. Sorry, my explanation is not that good right now. I had to see on something else and I got distracted. So one part attaches to a bony element that is not moving, that's sort of stable and anchors the muscle in position. And sort of gives you the backdrop. And then we have another muscle attachment that attaches to a bone that will create movement when the muscle contracts. So the muscle origin is the base that doesn't move, that sort of anchors the muscle into the body. I think that's really a good way of thinking about it. One attachment of the bone needs to hold on to the body, then the other attachment to the other bone can pull and move the bone in certain directions. In here, it flexes the elbow, it bends the elbow towards the shoulder, so you can drink a little bit of water or so. And so that part that moves is known as the insertion, and the part of the attachment that doesn't move, that anchors the muscle, is known as the origin. So because whenever we go through muscles and we describe muscles, we got to tell us and understand where do they attach. Because the place where the muscle attaches on a bone will determine what it does when it moves, when it contracts, when it shortens. And so we're basically talking about a complicated pulley system at the end. We have sticks and we have rubber bands or contraction things like the muscles that pull the sticks around. And so it becomes important where the attachments are. And when we describe muscle attachments, the books very often go very, very in detail of where those muscle attachments are. And as a new student of anatomy, I always felt like it was just completely overwhelming. And so what I did now let's go to the muscles here and start talking about them. Beautiful, huh? Those green things. See here, when I look, for example, this description here of the muscle, this is a quite extensive description of where the muscle starts and anchors into the bones. But you've learned what is the external occipital protuberance because we studied the skull so far. And then you have a place that we haven't studied yet, the nuchal ligament, and I explain what that is. And so I have pictures here that aren't the greatest because these are all pictures that I can put in here and there's no legal whatever going on with it. And so that's why you have the booklets. There you have more detailed pictures, or you can also look the stuff online on Google and study that. But see here, for example, we have the trapezius muscle. See here, it says trapezius muscle. So then you see down here, it says trapezius. And so what you do now is to then read further, and the video talks about it. That's just the written portion of the class. And then you go and look like, oh, EOP. Oh, I remember where that is. That's up here by the skull somewhere. Or you look it up and you want to work your way through it. And then nuchal ligament, you will learn, is this line right here. And then you see here spinous process. And then actually I also put in parentheses what the shortcut of that is, because sometimes, especially then when I make lists, and I show you the list that I made, I'm just using SP instead of spinous process because it's easier to not have the list be so long. But see here, it says spinous process of C7 to T12. That means every bump here, all the way down to below here, see this keeps going down here, the muscle, is going to be an attachment of this muscle. So this whole line here is where this big muscle attaches and then, or originates from. And then it inserts in, that's the other attachment, says acromion and spine of the scapula and lateral third of the clavicle. So these are all terms that you've now, last week we talked about the acromion, the spine of the scapula, the clavicle also, we talked about that. Now I know stuff comes rapidly, but this is how you get repetition. And so this is also how you're going to keep learning last week's material and integrate it in this week. And so the acromion is right here. See here, it says acromion, and then the spine of the scapula is right here. And you see there's the muscle attachment. This white stuff is fascia. The white stuff are collagen fibers that then anchor into the bone, and they anchor into the bone with little small fibers that are called Sharpie's fiber, like Sharpie, like the pen, kind of the way it's spelled. And they anchor, like they have anchors, like a boat anchor, you know, like a good old boat anchor that anchors the boat into the ground. Those are they look like that, and they anchor the muscle into the bone and attaches really, really strongly. And that's that white stuff that you see here. And then, so that's the spine of the scapula, the acromion, and then when you actually go to the front, you see here, this is the clavicle. And you see here, this attachment right here goes into this muscle too. That's still the trapezius. It rounds around. And that's the clavicular portion that says the lateral third. The lateral is to the outside, right? We learned that in the first week. So the outside third of the clavicle is where that muscle also attaches to. So that gives you all the attachments. And then when we look at all the attachments, you think, oh, this muscle is now shortening and contracting. Then you start visualizing what is going to happen when that happens, when you do that, when the muscle does that. And then you get to action. That's what action means. And see, I put it in parentheses as A. So after the first time, I just say OIA. But that way, that's what that means. One of the things that bothered me in anatomy classes was when there was just so many different words, and it was always the foreign words. I always had to look up over and over again. So that's why I kind of like define it, and then we do a short, you know, we just write it down like that. Anyway, the action. So let's think about when that muscle contracts. Let's think about the muscle. And so this is also interesting. And oh, this is actually now I'm in a pickle myself because I didn't practice that properly or didn't tell you that part. Very often in the body, the origin and the insertion in terms of what anchors the muscle and what pulls can flip and can be backwards depending on which part of the muscle anchors and which part pulls. So a trapezius can pull on the shoulder when we move the arm around and the shoulder around, but it can also flip and have this part be anchored and move the neck around and help move the spine around and pull on this. Now, in anatomy, we not change the word origin and insertion, even though the action can flip. In this instance, for example, when we have this trapezius pull on the shoulder blade here, it's going to bring the shoulder blade upward and outward, and that will bring the arm up and out. And so you're going to raise the arm as one of the actions that will come out of that motion here. Actually, what you really do is you raise the shoulder blade up, and then that helps bring the arm up. So the arm movement will be done by a deltoid. That's the next muscle that we're going to touch on. Then we're going to do that next week. So when it comes now to muscles, we're going to slow down the pace because this gets where it gets more complicated. And this is also where I'm very happy to get you extra sessions and we do extra tutorings and so forth. Because if you understand this quite well, you really get a lot of head understanding of anatomy stuff, because this is the stuff I can bring you clinically very well and talk to you about it from relevance perspectives. And so now we move the shoulder, when we contract the trapezius and pull on this end. And now what we can do is we reverse it, and this is the axial musculature. So first we talk about the trunk. So in here, the trapezius is actually a muscle that we'll talk about twice. We also talk about when we talk about the upper arm muscles next week. But when we pull the spine, then this is what we can do as action. We can extend the head. So now think about the muscle anchors here, and it pulls on this end. This will bring the head back and flip it back. And so that's an extension of the head. When you contract, particularly when you contract on both sides. See, on this side, you see this muscle. On this side, you see how it's caught. You see the cut right here. You see the cut? So that's where it's caught. And so this is where you only see, we don't see that top layer of the musculature. We see the layer underneath it. That's why they do that in anatomy books. So we don't have the same visuals on the same side, on both sides. However, both this muscle exists on both sides. And so when we contract both sides, we tilt the head back. That's one of the actions. Or when we only contract on one side and we pull on that head, we're going to bring that head to the side and bring the head closer to the shoulder, tilt it to the side. And so you visualize when you talk about these actions, you go through one-on-one. That's tedious work. That's why I have you write it down also in the label and coloring, but you visualize them. And once you do that, then you really start understanding what's happening. And you just have to understand also that it is very detailed and it's a lot of stuff. And I don't ask you to memorize any of this. I ask you to try to understand it, and then we can apply it. But all my tests are open book. And so that's why I do that. I don't want you to just memorize, oh, this is called that and this is called that, because that's not going to get you, well, that's going to get you through the test, but the test is not real life. And when you go into nursing or PT or exercise physiology or anything like that, you want to, or just use this info for yourself, you want to come from how does this really work in real life perspective? And so what I also did here on this is there is this guy. It's actually the American Surgical Corporation made cadaver videos and put them on a DVD. And then at some point I got some, and then I also went online and I saw them all chopped up and all that. So what I did is I took these videos and I clipped them and made little clips. This is a minute long. Most of them are like 15 seconds long. Can you see them? Are you guys seeing this fleshy thing?
Yes.
Good, because sometimes the Zoom shows different, so you have to tell me. And it talks about the muscle, and it gives you an example in how it really looks in a body.
Complicated muscle.
The guy sounds really boring, but
The trapezius has
he is a British guy, but it's really good that he sounds boring because he's very clear and it's very interesting materials. So those are all underneath the muscles. They are there for you to get more of a visual. Some people might feel like it's a little, it's a little gross or so, but it's an anatomy class, so I can get away with that. We sometimes go into the cadaver lab too. I'm not sure if we can this semester. So, but if some of you guys would like to, I'm sure we can organize that, and we can because it's helpful to see this in real, but I know it can be a little extreme. But so, every muscle you go through this process, and then you color and you label it. You do that at the same time, maybe, that's what I would do. And that's how you sort of process that material. And don't think you need to know the whole thing as a collective. Just understand that if you're a little overwhelmed, that is actually the place where we need to be, even though it's not necessarily comfortable. I know that's part of the problem with being a student. So just, the more we are okay with that, the easier it is. And so on the other things, and again, if you have questions, just break in and interrupt me. The other things we want to do this week is discuss the ergonomic evaluation a little bit, the workstation eval we did last week. That's what with every health kit I have that in there, and I'm trying to go through most of them and be interactive too. Sometimes it gets a lot, and sorry if I'm a little behind, but that's it's a lot of work in the background. just be patient with me as well as I try to be with you in case stuff comes up. And then after that, this week, what we're going to do is a posture eval. So last week we looked at the workstation, and I did that for Merritt a few years ago to put that together. But before that, we had the pre-pandemic, I was doing more a posture evaluation with the class only. And so what I want you to do, and I kept it in there now because now we have some understanding what that means, but now we're going to stand. And so posture really is a standing, not a sitting evaluation of how we are in gravity. And so what I'm doing with this one, I want you to sort of get your posture evaluated. So you take a picture of you. Well, actually, what you do first is you march in place, close your eyes, and it's all described. And then you take a picture of you from the front, from the side, and from the back. And before you do that, you put different labelings or colorings or little dots or something or little tape that is colored. So you have landmarks and you put them on a different place that I'm spelling out here. And those are the terms you're learning in the label and coloring thing. So they're all there as well. And then you take those pictures and then of yourself, and then you analyze your posture. And this is me. Look, my head is way forward here. See, this should be lined up, and it's not lined up, these dots. And so you look at that and you sort of, if it's electronic, you can go edit the picture and sort of connect it. You can kind of do that all on the photograph. If you want to do it on paper, I have a worksheet thing printed out that looks like that. It's better quality. And you can do the drawing on that and sort of see what is your posture situation look like. And see here, I describe it all. And so you can just follow these prompts. And then also, this is a video of a physical therapist that does a posture on a person. So it's only 4 minutes. It's maybe good to also just look at that and see what they're saying. And again, because I'm doing those because good posture helps you lose less energy on just standing, and you can use the energy for something else. Maybe that, is the way to explain it. And then I want you to just make a little video or answer these questions in some paragraph a little bit. So we do that. I don't need you to upload your pictures if you feel uncomfortable about that. Don't worry about that. That's why I have the questions that I need you just to do that yourself. Some people do, some people don't care. I don't care. Obviously, mine are all over the place. But I want to be sensitive, so you don't have to feel like you got to worry about any of that. And then part 2 about this exercise is, of course, we're going to do some stretches again. And these are, most of the problems that we have in our modern world of sitting, as we've already seen with the sitting posture, is this head forward thing and the rounded shoulders forward thing. If you look at me here, see how these shoulders are forward a little bit. They should be back a little more. And they're not. This the other thing, the head standing crooked there a little bit. It's even hard to see on an X-ray because an X-ray has a distortion pattern in it a little bit. So, but the side view is very telling of sort of what's going on in that plane. And that's a very important plane as it comes to gravity going down, because the spine has curves in it. They can see them right in here, which act like sort of springs and balance the spine over on gravity. And if that head is too much forward and that curve is not there, well, that's a big problem over time. And so that's really the biggest kahuna, is the head forward and around the shoulders. And so what I'm going through here are exercises that are known in PT, ortho, and all that sort of circle stuff, and chiro and all that biomechanics, of really helping with changing that over time if we do them. And just if you actually do this first chin retraction exercise by holding your chin in and then holding it and then bringing your heart back, you can feel, or I can feel on me, how my muscles back here relax. I can feel more blood going into them a little bit. And so that's those are a few stretches that I want you to do a few times. This Brooker position is very classic, where you bring the head back and you also bring the arm out and really create a lot of room in this area here, which is a lot of people get in there get thoracic outlet syndromes, and carpal tunnel problems can arise from here when this is too contracted, because all the nerves come out and all these muscles get really tight. And so this is a very useful stretch for a lot of office desk sitting people of us. And then I want you to do one of those or all of them. I forgot. You read through it. I mean, you should probably do all of them if you can. Oh, but one of the things I don't want you to do is do them when they hurt. So if something gives you trouble, what you can do is ease up. Don't go extreme, because sometimes you just want to push a little too hard. But if it's causing you pain or discomfort, then reach out to me and stop doing it. And then we can talk about maybe that one of them you shouldn't be doing too much or so. Usually, potentially this one can be a little bit too stretchy on people, for example. But it's a really good one for most of us. And so I want you to do them, for a week, a couple times a day, and then track it on a tracker. And then actually the discussion came up last week, which was a good one, because I still spaced out to doing that. The exercise is due next Sunday, but the tracker you might start on Sunday because you're starting to do the work on the weekend. And then what I do is I just give you the last 5 points when you resubmit the tracker once you're done. I think that's the easiest way, and I'm going to rewrite the material briefly about that. But that's why some of you in the grading on the workstation with the stretch has got 5 points less so far, and then when the tracker goes up, and I explained it in, and when the tracker goes up, then I give you the rest of the points. As you've noticed so far, I hope my grading is not that, mostly except for the tests. It's not a you did it right, you did it wrong, that's a definite. No, it's a process. So I don't give you credit if you don't do the labeling the terms, all of the terms, or if I see a few missing, I don't give you the credit. You go in and finish it, you put it back up, I give you the credit. So it's really about a feedback mechanism system. So that also, needless to say, sometimes the grade reflection in the system is not what's going on. So if you're worried about your grade, reach out to me, we can talk about it. And mostly what I will tell you is to ignore it. If you do all the work, you'll be fine. If you don't do the work, obviously we're going to have to talk about it. And I will be trying to reach out to people who haven't done too much so we can catch you guys up if it's been a little hard, because it's hard to take an online class. I'll be very honest about it. It's not easy to get motivated oneself. And so if you have a hard time with that, reach out. I can help you with that. I can be a little bit in dialogue with you more if that's your problem, or if the circumstances are just overwhelming. Life happens. So anyway, that's enough said on my end. Then the posture, if we have some time tonight in the lab, we'll do some of this posture eval there together. So if you want to join, come on in. So that's enough on my end. Any questions? Comments? Does that make sense what I've been blabbering?
Yes.
Good. Sorry. I had a really hard, I couldn't sleep well last night, so I'm a little spaced out. Apologize for that. All right, well, if that's the case, we can go our merry way, and I'm here for you guys. I'll keep grading all day, and see you tonight, some of you. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. M.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you much. Bye-bye.